Today, you're going to add a weapon to your opening repertoire against the Sicilian Defense with the Smith-Morra Gambit. This is the first episode in a two-part series where we'll be going over the declined variations, and in another video I'm going to be going over the accepted variations, so be sure to subscribe for that. Let's get into it. So, black's only real move here, being played 75% of the time, is to capture this pawn on d4, and after this you're going to play the move c3, giving black the option to accept your gambit or play something else and decline your gambit. Now, in this video, I'm trying to go over the most important variations and deliver it in a way in which I'm not showing you hundreds and hundreds of variations, but I'm showing you the important ones and the ones which could be slightly easier to remember so that you guys also understand the point behind them and then are actually able to execute them in your games. So there are a few ways in which black can decline, but don't worry, we're going to be going through every single one of them, and the first one we're going to be looking at is the move knight f6. When black plays the move knight f6, you're going to play this move e5, pushing your pawn forward and attacking this knight. Now, by far the most common move, being played 97% of the time, is knight d5, and it is by far the best move as well. And after this, obviously, the knight has come here. You're now going to capture this pawn on d4. And already, you can see that we have a pretty nice central presence with our pawn structure. Now, black decides to play the move e6. We're also going to be going through the move d6 as well in the next section, but for this case, they're going to play the move e6. After they play the move e6, you're going to offer a trade of knights with the move knight c3, and here black has two of the most common moves. They are the moves bishop b4 and the move knight takes c3. First of all, if they play the move bishop b4, you have this bishop here, so why not use it? You're simply going to block this kind of pin with the move bishop d2, blocking any potential nasty things along this knight and this king. Now, they do have a few options. I'm going to show you the two most common moves. If they decide to capture with their knight, great, you're simply going to capture back with your pawn, force their bishop back, play queen g4, threatening g7 there, and then they're going to play g6. You're very, very ready to do whatever you want here. I mean, you could play knight f3, get your bishop out and castle, and you just play a game of chess, right? However, after they move bishop d2, they don't actually have to capture on c3 like this. Instead, some of your opponents might try and be clever and play this move queen a5. Now, technically, this is not a very good move because this allows you to play the move a3. And after this, black has sort of put all their money in taking this knight, because if they were just to retreat, then, well, we're just going to play the move knight f3, and their queen is a bit misplaced, their bishop isn't really doing much, and then you just play a game of chess. But, so they've kind of really bought into taking this knight on c3, and when they do take it, you may be thinking, well, when we take back, surely we've just lost the pawn. Well, if your opponent does play the most common move and decide to capture on c3, then you have this move, queen b3. And the idea is this knight is pinned to its queen, and the knight cannot move because it's pinned to its queen, and we have two attackers on it, so we're going to win it on the next move. So, that is what happens after, in this possession, after knight c3, they play the move bishop b4. Instead, if they decide to play the move knight takes c3, we're simply going to capture back with our b-pawn, creating this very, very, very strong pawn chain. By the way, if you don't feel like you can remember all this, it's perfectly fine. Down below in the description, I've got the link to my lead chess study so that you have all the moves at your disposal for there to see. So, we're going to capture back with our b-pawn, and then they do have a few options. I'm going to include the most common move. If they play the move d6, we're now going to play this move f4, and this is a really, really nice idea, because if they want to take you, well, you could just simply capture back with your f-pawn, and you restore this really, really strong pawn chain. So there it is. And now they could have a few options. They could try and play the move queen c7. If they do that, fine. You're just going to play the move bishop d2, defending your c-pawn. And from here, you have bishop d3. And after something like bishop b7, you simply play the move knight f3. You're ready to castle in the future. And you have a very, very nice position here. And that is very, very nice. So now we've looked at what happens after all of these moves. And then the move e6. So now, instead, let's take a look at the move d6. So, after the move d6, we are going to be playing the move knight to f3. And in this position, I'm going to be showing you guys three of the main moves for blacks. They are the moves knight c3, d takes e5, and e6. First of all, let's look at the move d takes e5. If they were to capture your pawn, we're going to capture back with our d-pawn, just like this. Now, there are quite a few moves which could of course be played in this position. For example, if they wanted to play the move e6, you could typically play bishop c4, castle your king, and have a very, very nice game. Instead, if they wanted to play the move knight e6, you're ready to play this move bishop c4 once more. And now, if they want to play e6, well, we're simply going to castle our king, and it looks very, very similar to before. If they wanted to play the move knight b6, dropping back, hitting your bishop, perfectly fine. You're simply going to trade queens along this file. They capture back with their knight. You're going to drop back to b3. The most common move here is to play the move bishop e6, and after this you have knight c3. They take, you capture back, and your idea here is to play the move bishop e3 and castle your king. Another thing here is that the move bishop e3 does set up a little bit of a fun trap, because if you take here, they can't capture back because of this, which is very, very nice. But of course, that is just one thing to point out in terms of tactics. So that is what happens when they take on e5 in this position. Now, let's look at what happens if they play the move e6. Against e6, it is relatively simple. All you're going to do is simply play the move knight c3, getting your knight, offering a trade of knights just like so. If they want to capture your knight, so be it. You capture back with this b pawn, and remember this pawn chain from the last section we looked at, it looks very, very familiar. So if they want to capture you, that is perfectly fine. Instead, if they want to capture on e5, that is perfectly fine as well. That is why your knight is here. You're simply going to capture it back like this. If they want to decide and pin you and play the most common move, remember what we did in the first section, it is very, very similar. The rule of thumb, bishop d2. Block this pin and you are absolutely fine. They castle, you play the move bishop d3, and as we can see here, we have a very, very nice position. So that is what happens after they play the moves d takes e5 and e6. And now, finally, let's take a look at the move knight to c6. Now, against knight c6, we're going to be symmetrical. They've played knight c6, and we're going to play the move knight c3. And in this position, black has two main options. Either they can capture our knight on c3, or they can take our pawn on e5. If they want to take our pawn on e5, we are simply going to capture back just like this, where the most common move by absolutely miles is to take our knight on c3. Because black sees, well, if we capture back, then look, we're ruining our pawn structure, right? Well, it's really not that big of a deal. You're simply going to capture the queen. It doesn't matter really how they capture back. Most people will capture back with their knight to retain the right to castle their king. And then you're simply going to capture back with the p-pawn. Your idea here is if they play the move knight e6, you're going to play bishop b5, pinning it. And then you can play bishop e2 and bishop e3. Get your rooks into the board and have a very, very nice game. And instead, if they decide to play the move e6, you're going to play bishop d3, bishop e3, and then king e2 once more to connect your rooks and have a very, very lovely game. So that is what happens if they decide to capture your pawn on e5. However, if they decide to simply capture your knight on c3, remember, obviously, it is our only move. We're simply going to capture back with our b-pawn, have this very, very strong pawn chain, which seems like we've seen a million times already in this video, and by far the most common move here is to capture on e5. But now let's not make a mistake. This is a critical part of the game. This position has been reached over 80,000 times. You're not going to take this like this, because then you will lose the right to castle. You're not going to take it like this either, because after this you are going to lose the right to castle again. So instead, what are you going to do? You're not going to take, you're going to push. You're going to attack this knight, and you're going to say no to a trade. And now, obviously, black can have a few moves, but the best move is to play this move e4. By the way, if they were simply to retreat their knight to b8, then you just play a game of chess. You take this, and you have a very, very nice game. And by the way, for your reference, it is a plus 1.5 position here for white. So instead, after the move d5, the best move is this move e4, where now we're going to play the move knight g5, with the idea that this is still being attacked, and now this is also being attacked. The most common move here being played 85% of the time is knight to e5, and after this, you can capture this pawn if you wish, and that's perfectly reasonable. Do that if you want. However, I'm also going to show you guys this move bishop f4, because this does attack this knight, and if they decide to give this check, being also the best move, you're going to take, they're going to take back, and then you're going to take on d3, equalizing the material and also winning that pawn back anyway. The only reason I recommend the move bishop f4 instead of capturing here immediately is because in bishop, if you were to capture it here immediately, their knight would still be in the center of the board, and that could annoy you a bit. But instead, in the bishop f4 line, after this, they no longer have that knight in the middle of the board, and you are perfectly fine. So, believe it or not, you've already learned everything to do with knight f6 from this position. And to be honest, there are only really 3 other ways in which black can decline this. There are the moves d3, d5, and e5. Those are the moves we are going to be looking at in this video. And to be honest, if you can nail this move knight f6, you're going to be able to nail everything else very, very easily as well, because I've shortened it down into very, very simple variations that you will be able to either remember or understand very, very well in your games. So, first of all, let's look at this move d3. Against d3, absolute shock, we're going to capture back this pawn. Obviously, it also develops our bishop slightly, and they're basically saying, well, we don't want to get involved in any nasty stuff. We're simply going to give this pawn back, and we're going to capture it back with this move, bishop takes d3. And here, black has three main options. They could play the move knight d6, they could play the move d5, and they can also play the move d6. If they play the move knight d6, you're simply going to play this move f4. And the idea is, well, let's say they play something like g6, you're going to bring your knight to f3, you can castle your king, and as you can see here, you've already got this pawn forward, you've got a great central presence, and your bishop is also very, very strong. You can bring your pieces into the game, and as you guys can see here, this position is very, very nice. So, that is what happens after they play the move knight c6. After knight c6, you're going to play this move f4. Instead, if they play the move d5, we're not going to capture here, because if we do that, then this all of a sudden, we don't want their queen getting too near us. So instead of capturing this pawn, we're simply going to play the move e5, instead pushing our pawn. And against this, there are a few things which black can do. For example, if they want to play the move knight d6 and try and pester your pawn, it's perfectly fine. Play knight f3, defend it. You're ready to cast on the next move. You can always develop your bishops. Your bishop has a nice role here, and that is very, very nice. So that is perfectly fine as well. But instead, after the move e5 of playing the move knight c6, your opponent might just decide to play the move e6, simply solidifying their position a bit. If they want to do this, perfectly fine. You can play the move bishop e3, you can also play the move f4, it doesn't really matter either way. You could play f4 and then play the move bishop e3, or you could play the move bishop e3 and then play the move f4, it kind of reaches the same thing. But a good rule of thumb here, when they do play this move d3 on this move, is you are looking to play f4. It is a very, very nice idea. You don't always have to play it. If you don't want to, that is perfectly fine. But I'm just recommending it. I just think it looks cool. And it does work as well. So that is why I'm recommending it. So that is what happens after the move d5. We're simply going to push our pawn forward. And we are looking to get this f4 move on the board. And then, as we said, bishop e3 as well. Very, very solid position. Knight f3 to come. And then we simply castle our king. So, that is what happens after the moves knight c6 and the move d5. The last move is very, very simple, and it is the move d6. Against d6, it is very, very simple. We're simply going to actually play this move c4. Now, the idea of c4 is quite nice. The idea is that obviously we are controlling d5 even more, but also it opens up this square for our knight. So, if you are able to remember that, by all means, please do. It would be a very, very nice move to remember, because what it means is, let's say they play the move knight f6, the most common move being played 43% of the time. Boom, you could play the move knight c3. It gains you some central control, defends your e4 pawn even more, and this square is now able for your knight to be moved into, which is very, very nice. A setup for black could be this move g6. You're going to play knight ge2, bishop g7. You're both going to castle and then play the move h3. But of course, they don't have to play the move g6. I mean, there's a lot of things which black can do here, of course. But the main idea is, let's say they were to even play the move knight c6. Again, knight ge2 is the best move. And it's very, very simple. You're simply going to castle your king. And the reason you're going to play this move h3 is to try and stop this bishop from coming here. But if they do try and come here straight away, it is perfectly fine. You can play the move f3 and just get rid of it, and either way is perfectly fine. But now we've actually covered everything you need to know for this move d3. So we are absolutely rolling through this, and a quick reminder that if you are worried about not being able to remember everything, link is in the description to my Lichess study, so you can always have the moves at your disposal to learn there. Now let's go on to the next section. A quick change of clothing, and now we're looking at the d5 line, and I've included some really fun lines and tried to keep it as simple as possible, so don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy. Against the move d5, we're going to be very simple and capture this pawn on d5, and after black plays by far the most common move, with queen takes d5 being played 85% of the time, we're simply going to capture on d4 with our pawn, giving ourselves some more space, preparing to develop our knight to c3 and be very, very normal. Now, black decides to play the move knight c6, adding extra pressure to our d4 pawn. So what do? We be very, very simple, and we play the move knight to f3. And here I've included two main moves for black. They are the moves bishop g4 and the move e5. First of all, let's look at the really, really fun bishop g4. Against bishop g4, what we're going to do is decide to play the move knight to c3, attacking their queen. Obviously, if they don't do anything about it, well, you've won a queen, well done. But usually, by far the most common move is to take on f3 with the bishop. And here, taking back with the queen is not ideal, because then they'll just do this, and then you have doubled pawns, and they're free to take here if they wish. But usually, they could just play e6 or anything like that. So that's generally not what you want to do. Instead, what you're going to do is just capture back with your pawns straight away. And after this, black looks like they've just won a free pawn on d4. But you're instead going to play queen takes d4, and after knight takes d4, and they say, well, look at me, I've just won a free pawn. We're going to play the move knight b5. And here there are three main responses, and only one of them really keeps it normal for black. So, if they decide to play the move knight takes b5, guess what? You are totally winning. You simply have bishop takes b5 check, they have to move their king, then you play the move king to e2. Absolutely insane stuff, freeing up this rook ready to come to d1. For example, after the move knight to f6, rook d1 check, king c7, and bishop e3. And here, as you guys can see from the eval bar, white is totally winning. So, that's what happens if they decide to take on b5. Instead, if they decide to play the move knight to e6, stopping this fork, you're simply going to take on a7, sacrificing a full knight, and when black captures, you have bishop b5 check, and after king d8, the only move, you have bishop to e3, attacking this rook, and if black doesn't defend the rook or move the rook, then you're simply going to take it. But if they do anything by trying to make it actually move, such as, for example, rook to a8, then you have the move bishop b6 check, and after the king moves, then you're completely winning with rook c1, and it is mate in 2 from this position. For example, if they weren't to go to a8 and instead decided to go to, let's say, rook to a6, then obviously you just take and then play whatever you decide to play. For example, king to e2, rook d1 on the next move, and you guys are doing very, very nicely, as you guys can see from the eval bar. But the last move, which we do of course need to mention, is this move knight to c2, which doesn't actually blunder the game. Knight c2 is very, very simple. All you're going to do is play this move king to d1, and after they decide to capture you, you fork them back, and after this, there is this funny little sequence, which you can look at in the study if you wish, where you end up winning back the knight, and the position is roughly equal, but white has a slight advantage. So, from that, we have covered everything after the move bishop to g4 in this position. But they can also play the move e5, and e5 is relatively simple. After the move e5, you're simply going to play the move at knight to c3, and this attacks black's queen. Now, first of all, if they want to decide to move their queen somewhere, for example, if they go to queen to d8, they are completely screwed, because you have the move d5 after they decide to move their knight, then you have knight takes e5, you win a pawn. If they decide to play the best move a6, stopping your bishop from coming here, you can actually play this move queen to a4, and after bishop d7, you trade, and then you even have the move bishop b5. Just for an example as to how cool this line can be, because they can't take because of this. And for example, if they wanted to play, I don't know, let's say knight c6, you take with the d pawn, and I mean, you're just completely winning to stop this pin. So that's how cool this line can be, but obviously they don't need to play the move queen d8. Instead, they could simply just play this move bishop b4, pinning your knight, which I think, yeah, is the best move. And after this, remember, rule of thumb, bishop d2, you're very, very simple. If they want to capture you, great, they can do that. If they want to capture you again, well, that's fine. You just take on d4 with your knight, and you're perfectly fine. If they decide to push, great. You could just jump into e5 with your knight, and after knight takes e5, d takes e5, and knight e7, bishop e2, you're ready to castle. Your queen is completely fine, and your position is very, very strong, and you even have the bishop pair. So, believe it or not, you have just learned everything you need to know after they decide to play the move d5 in this. d5 in this position. The last option we need to look at in the declined Smith-Morra is this move e5. And to be honest, there really is not much to cover here. It's basically just straightforward chess. After this, you're simply going to play the move knight to f3. Black has two options. First of all, if they decide to capture on c3, well, you're simply just going to capture back with your knight. After knight t6, by far the most common move, you play the move bishop c4. And here, I mean, you've got two knights, you've got a bishop out. You're just going to develop, castle your king, and play a game of chess. If instead they decide to play the move knight to c6 in this position, great, you'll just trade pawns in the center of the board, capture in the middle of the board. Black has two options. If they play the move knight to f6, knight c3, bishop b4 if they want to do that. You could take on c6, and after this, bishop d3, and look, your position is completely equal, but perfectly fine as well. Or instead, if they decide to capture your knight on d4, while your queen is ready to capture back anyway. And really, after this move, e5, it's completely simple chess. The real stuff which we have learned in this video is the moves d3, the move d5, the move knight f6, followed up by either e6 or d6. And to be honest, that is literally everything you need to know in the declined Smith-Morra. So basically everything that happens if they don't decide to capture your pawn on c3. And to be honest, I really hope you guys learned something new in this video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. And this opening does have a pretty high win rate, so I've had some awesome games in it myself. Lots of people have. It's an awesome opening. It's been played millions of times, and to be honest, I just really love it. So if you enjoyed, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hopefully you guys can win some awesome chess games with the theory you've learned. See you guys in the next one, and have a great day.